Okay, it is 6 o'clock, so we'll get started. Hello, welcome. This is the Grandview Drive Traffic Calming Meeting number 1. On behalf of the City of Ann Arbor, I'd like to thank you for joining us in this opportunity to engage with community members. These traffic calming projects rely on resident feedback, so we really appreciate and encourage participation in this. And if you didn't get a chance to complete the demographic poll, I will relaunch it at the end of the meeting. As an introduction, we'll get those out of the way. My name is Christy Thullen. I will be presenting tonight. I'm joined by Lori Pollock, and we both work at Wade Trim. The traffic calming team for Grandview Drive is a partnership between the City of Ann Arbor and Wade Trim. Wade Trim is an engineering firm based here in Southeast Michigan, and we've been contracted with the city, by the city, to assist with their traffic calming projects. So this includes design work, project management, hosting these public meetings, sending out communications to the public, all of that stuff. From the Wade Trim team members include Chris Wall, Lori Pollock, and myself. So if you see any of our names or faces or just the name Wade Trim at all throughout the project, just know that we are working on behalf of the City of Ann Arbor. And naturally, with this partnership, we're working closely with the Ann Arbor City staff. There are many other city staff members and departments we've been coordinating with throughout these projects, but specifically, we've been working with Andrea Wright and Cynthia Redinger. And this is our meeting agenda for tonight. Most of tonight's time will be dedicated to the meeting 1 portion under section 3, where we will review devices, present the starter idea, and collect feedback. Just to get this out of the way, a little bit of technology overview. If you're joining from a computer or using the Zoom app, there are going to be 2 ways of asking questions and providing feedback. You can virtually raise and lower your hand using the button at the bottom of your screen. This will notify the host. When you're recognized to speak, you will be able to unmute yourself and talk. If you'd rather type a question or comment out throughout the meeting, you can press the Q&A button that's also at the bottom of your screen. A chat box will appear. You can type in the text box, press send to submit your message. And if you would like to send your feedback anonymously, just make sure that you check the box there. For any attendees dialing in by phone, you may request to speak by dialing *9. You'll be recognized to speak by the last 3 digits of your phone number, and you'll be unmuted. You'll be able to speak then, but you won't be able to use the Q&A function. That's web-based only. Additionally, there are going to be multiple points throughout the presentation where community feedback will be requested through Zoom's polling feature. Again, if you're on a computer or using the app and a poll is launched, it'll just automatically pop up for you. After you answer the polling question, just press submit. When the poll closes, the results will automatically pop up. You can press close to stop viewing those results. And additionally, I'll just close the results for everyone once we're ready to move on. And I don't see anyone in the meeting tonight who is, but if you were to dial in by phone to the meeting, I would read the question aloud and any available responses. And you can still participate in the poll. You would just have to raise your hand and speak your polling answer out loud. So in that way, it's not anonymous, but you do have the option to participate in polling. So just as a test, I will launch our first project area poll question here. It'll pop up for you automatically. The question is, do you live in the project area? And the project area being Grandview Drive between Jackson Avenue and Dexter Avenue. And then I will share the results. So they should also be on your screen now. You can either close them out or I will stop sharing in a moment, but it looks like everyone in the meeting tonight is a project area resident, so that's great. And then lastly, during the presentation, especially during any feedback from your fellow community members, your neighbors, please just keep these Zoom norms in mind. Start on time, end on time, raise your hand to be recognized to talk. There's just going to be one speaker at a time. Please move to a quiet area, silence any background sounds when speaking. Just make sure you're speaking loud and clear so we can all hear you. Everyone will be provided a chance to speak before we have any repeat speakers. Be respectful of other ideas and perspectives. Try to differentiate between I know and I think. And then lastly, inappropriate written and or verbal comment or language, including personal attacks and accusations, will not be tolerated and will result in the attendee being removed from the meeting. If there's anything I've missed, I'll pause here. You can raise your hand, you can use the Q&A. I'll also note, please use the Q&A function freely. We'll monitor it throughout the meeting, but just to keep with the agenda, we may wait for a pause in our presentation before we start answering some of the questions, but please use it freely if you're not comfortable raising your hand. So I'm not seeing any hands or anything in our Q&A, so I'll move on. Onto the good stuff, onto the traffic calming process. This slide is just a definition from the Institute of Transportation Engineers Journal. Traffic calming is the combination of mainly physical measures that reduce the negative effects of motor vehicle use, alter driver behavior, and improve conditions for non-motorized street users. So focus in traffic calming is really to make changes that not only make the road safer for drivers, but safer for pedestrians, wheelchair users, bicyclists, scooters, etc. There are quite a few. There are many examples of traffic calming in Ann Arbor, so we'll show some of them in later slides. But if you weren't familiar before today, the traffic calming program in Ann Arbor is designed to provide residents with a formal process for engaging with the city in a partnership to perform a technical analysis of traffic concerns on local streets and to explore potential solutions using those fundamentals of traffic calming. Here in the city, it's a 5-step program. I'll briefly describe each step, but there's a guidebook available online that has more detail if you'd like to review anything after this meeting. So starting with step 1, the Grandview Drive project started with one of your neighbors acting as a petitioner who submitted a request to the traffic calming program for Grandview Drive between Jackson Avenue and Dexter Avenue. After defining the project area, the petitioner gathered signatures from other residents who also live in this area. The requirement for the traffic calming program to accept the request is that at least 50% of the defined project area must support the project, and then a preliminary technical study must result in at least 10 points. The Grandview Drive project area managed to collect signatures from 100% of the addresses, and the preliminary study resulted in 11 points. There is a breakdown of those points. They're available on the project website, but that slide is just to show you that we were able to move on to step 2. So at step 2, Wade Trim sent out mailers with an initial questionnaire to all of the project area residents, just to gather feedback on specific concerns you may have had, or you may have, and what experiences you may have previously had with traffic calming. The requirement to continue on to step 3 is that at least 50% of those who participate in the questionnaire must support the project moving forward. So of the questionnaire responses we received, 89% were in favor. And then there's a detailed summary of the initial questionnaire that can be found on the project website here. In general, results from the initial questionnaire indicated that speeding and cut-through or turnaround traffic is being observed. The important crossings for Grandview that were mentioned in the feedback are shown at the starred locations, but it was also noted that mid-block crossing is observed, and there are bus stops on both Jackson and Dexter that are pretty close to Grandview, as well as a school on the other side of Dexter. If there's any additional concerns that aren't listed here, or any context or clarification anyone would like to make, again, we'll pause here and maybe see if anyone had anything to put in the Q&A, or raise a hand if you would like. Okay, still not seeing anything, so I'll keep moving forward. Okay, step 3 is where we are today, where most of the focus for this rest of the meeting will be. Before we present the starter idea, we'll just go through an overview of the device toolbox that's described in the program's guidebook. Before I do that, I will launch another poll that's just asking how familiar you might be with the guidebook. The question reads, have you reviewed the traffic calming guidebook, specifically the device toolbox found on pages 9 through 12? So I'll give it a moment for everyone to have an opportunity to answer the poll question. And then you should see the results. So it looks like everyone's at least looked at the guidebook, which is good. So we'll move forward, and I'll actually hand it off to Lori, who will take it over from here.
Thank you, Christy. Because of the structure of this program, the designs we proposed are limited to the device toolbox and guidebook. This means if it's not in the toolbox, it's not an option for this project. Some commonly suggested solutions are not included in this program. So those that are not included include stop signs, cul-de-sac, street closures, police enforcement, new sidewalk installation, and removal of existing devices. Additional information and resources can be found in the guidebook or on the A2Gov website. If you do want any additional information on these topics, there are some resources in the guidebook and A2Gov website. On pages 9 through 12 of the traffic calming guidebook, devices are grouped into things you drive over and those that you drive around. Move on to the next one here. The things that you drive over are devices that slow traffic by creating discomfort if traveled over a speed exceeding 25 miles an hour. The device toolbox presents 4 devices that fall under this category, including speed humps, speed tables, raised crosswalks, and raised intersections. Things that you drive over. Speed humps. A typical speed hump diagram is shown on the left here, and examples from Wells Street is shown on the right. Speed humps are typically 12 feet long, 3 inches high, have a parabolic shape, and they extend the full width of the street except for the gutter. And studies have found benefits of speed hump treatments that may include speed reductions, traffic volume reductions, and crash reductions. Some other notes regarding speed humps include the height is designed for the ease of bike usage and bike safety. And if previously permitted, vehicles can park on speed humps, and trash cans can also be placed on speed humps if necessary. This is a speed table on this slide. You can see a fully constructed example on Glenwood Road near Washtenaw. Speed tables are raised devices that extend the full width of the street except for the gutter. They're typically 22 feet long with tapered edges, a flat 10-foot center platform, and 3 inches high. Studies have found benefits of speed table treatments may include those reductions in traffic volumes and crash reductions as well. Some of the other notes regarding speed tables include speed reduction is less than the speed hump. The platform width can be customized. The height is designed for ease of bike usage and bike safety. If previously permitted, the vehicles can park on speed tables and trash cans can be placed on them if necessary. And here, this is a raised crosswalk shown. The example on the right is from Forest Avenue near Woodlawn Avenue. And raised crosswalks are devices that extend the full width of the street except for the gutter. They're typically 18 feet long with tapered edges, a flat 6-foot center platform marked with crosswalk striping, and they're 3 inches high. And then studies of streets with raised crosswalk treatments have shown reductions in speeds, as well as traffic volumes and crashes. Some other notes regarding raised crosswalks: they do increase pedestrian visibility. The installation must be compliant with ADA, and parking on a crosswalk is illegal, raised or not. And here, this is a raised intersection shown. The example is at Maplewood and Norwood Street. At the raised intersection, each leg is ramped to raise the entire intersection 3 inches high. Pedestrian crosswalks may also be marked and raised to the same elevation. Raised intersections are shown to reduce vehicle speed and increase pedestrian visibility. They must be compliant with ADA, and they're designed for bike safety, as well as to have a minimal impact on emergency vehicle response time. And here, if there's any questions about the devices you drive over, please raise your hand or go ahead and use the Q&A function. It looks like we have one here. Not a lot of speeding issues over 25, as it's such a short street. I think the no parking near the entry of the street is the bigger issue, as well as parking of special vehicles near intersections. Okay, thank you, Ben, for noting this. And when we take a look at the devices, we can revisit this comment.
And then we do have a hand raised, Lori, from Susan.
Okay.
Go ahead, Susan, you can unmute.
Okay.
One of our neighbors mentioned that this is a very narrow street, so I'm wondering which of the drive over solutions are best for a narrow street, in your professional opinions. And we also have parking only on one side of the street, which is enforced spottily. I don't know if that's another complication for what device is likely to be the best solution. This is an unusual little street here.
Yes, you have a short section here. So I think the first question was, for a short street, what type of things you drive over devices would work best?
Yes.
Yeah, and also it's very narrow because and many times there's parking on both sides of the street and there shouldn't be. So I don't know if that's another complication here in terms
Right.
of what's.
So the narrow factor really impacts the things you drive around options, kind of really limits what we could do there, because the things you drive around are kind of sticking out into the street and having, if you don't have enough width to begin with, there can be an issue with those. And then the things that you drive over, the really important factor with the traffic calming is spacing those correctly. So not necessarily, they're all pretty much the same height, but spacing them is what we look at when we're working on the design.
Okay, thank you.
Please remind me, can you park on a speed hump without approval? So for the speed hump, if previously permitted, vehicles can park on them. And then you can place your trash cans on them if necessary too.
Thank you, Lori. I'll go ahead and move on to the next section.
So the other group of devices in our toolbox are things that you drive around. This type of device slows traffic by creating the perception of less room for error in a road that's visually or physically narrower. The device toolbox presents 7 devices that fall under this category, including pedestrian gateways, median islands, pedestrian islands, residential traffic circles, mini roundabouts, curb extensions, and chicanes. The next few slides will describe each of these devices except for those marked in red. These devices have been omitted from this project due to the street width requirements set by fire department and conflict with existing traffic controls. So the first one that we have here is curb extensions, which can be used in several designs. Curb bump outs, mid-block bump outs, and chokers. Shown on the right is a bump out at Granger Avenue and White Street. Curb extensions act as an extension of the curb line to physically and visually tighten the corridor by narrowing street width. 2 parallel curb bump outs can be used to create a single lane width passageway or choke point. Alternating curb bump outs can be used to create the chicane effect. Curb extensions may require drainage considerations, may require the loss of on-street parking, may cause debris to collect around the device, and must maintain 20 feet for emergency response vehicles. 2-lane chokers may result in a speed reduction and have been shown to produce a minor reduction in traffic volumes. The next slide for chicanes. This slide shows an example of alternating curb bump outs that create a chicane effect. Like other curb extensions, chicanes may require drainage considerations, may require loss of on-street parking, may cause debris to collect around the device, and must maintain 20 feet for emergency response vehicles. And then other devices include neighborhood gateway treatments. These are a physical landmark that indicate a change from higher speed arterial road to a lower speed residential or commercial district. Neighborhood gateway treatments can increase awareness for residential speeds and may require additional right-of-way. In addition, neighborhood or adjacent property owners would bear landscaping, installation, and maintenance costs. If there are any questions about the devices that you drive around, please raise your hand or use the Q&A question function.
So to touch on what was commented earlier in the previous section, because Grandview is so narrow, a lot of those options that, even though they're in the guidebook as available devices to implement, unfortunately, it wouldn't work in the setup because the street is already so narrow. And if there aren't any questions regarding those devices, we'll move forward. But if anything comes to mind, again, you can use the Q&A or raise your hand. So thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
So if you'd like to see each of those devices, they had a little photo from an example that's in Ann Arbor. If you'd like to see additional examples of how these devices were used, there is an interactive map on the traffic calming website that shows all of the past and current projects. And I know we are right here in this little purple strip here. I believe this map is, I actually looked at it earlier today. It's just slightly outdated. I know this project here, I'm failing to remember which street this is, but I know that one has been constructed. But there are other efforts ongoing or that have been completed within this area. So next we'll present our starter idea, which is just a draft plan that we've created based on just the data collection, engineering judgment, the preliminary traffic study, and feedback from that initial questionnaire that that we had a response on. There will be opportunity to answer questions on each of the devices and discuss any changes you may like to see to the plan. But just keeping in mind that this project is limited to the devices that Lori just reviewed. Even though there are more available in the guidebook, because of the constraints with this street, some of them would not work. So this is the starter idea on the screen. Again, this is a draft created based on the information gathered from step 1 and 2. It is a really short amount of street on this block. We've proposed 2 devices for Grandview Drive, 2 speed humps. They're spaced to work together. That way we can hope to see the effect on the entire block. I'll pause here and let you take a look for a moment before I move forward, because the next slide is zooming in on that first device. So these 2 slides are going to be pretty similar, but device number 1 is a speed hump. It's near 110 and 117 Grandview Drive. Again, speed humps are most effective when used in a series, and when they're spaced in a way that there's not too much room for vehicles so that they can speed up between each one, but also you don't want them too close to each other that, you know, vehicles end up going so slow that they're under the speed limit and then have the entire rest of the block to pick up speed again before they hit the end. So 200 feet is roughly the minimum distance we want to see between these raised devices. There's only about 500 feet of street on Grandview Drive, so we've just chosen a pair of speed humps as our starter idea to see what kind of feedback we get or what thoughts come up from that. Just as a reminder, speed humps can result in speed reduction, traffic volume reduction, and crash reduction. Just things to keep in mind that if on-street parking is legal, is permitted, it's still permissible with speed humps. They are designed to be safe for both vehicles and bicyclists to travel over. I know there was a comment about the bigger issue being the no parking near the entry of the street and, you know, quote unquote special vehicles that park near the intersection. I will remind, unfortunately, enforcement is not something that this program can address. Enforcement can be addressed through the city, but not with traffic calming. So I know it came up more than once in the initial questionnaire feedback responses. So I know that it is an issue that's noticeable to more than one of you. And I can probably not during this meeting, but after the meeting, I can make sure that we have the proper resource or department phone number, name, whichever, that needs to be contacted to help with enforcement issues. But for traffic calming, I'll pause here, I guess, if there's any questions about the speed hump being in this location. And I'm not seeing any activity. I will move on to the next device. Oh, okay. I misunderstood that. Ben just clarified it's not an enforcement issue. There is legal parking permitted right up to the intersection, making turning unsafe. Makes turning in unsafe. And then there's another comment saying we have a lot of trucks who cut through but should not. Will this slow them? So it would slow down trucks having having speed humps here. I will say community standards will only conduct enforcement in this area if they are requested to come out. So enforcement of the no truck sign, they need to be, community standards would need to be requested to address this for the cut through traffic of trucks. The speed humps would slow them down. It may deter them knowing that there are speed humps on this block. But if you would like to see more trucks, or I'm sorry, if you would like to see fewer trucks, as in you would like to see trucks obeying the no truck sign, then we would need to reach out to community standards who will conduct enforcement. But in terms of the on-street parking, I don't have an answer of who to contact to remove parking. But I believe it would also be community standards, but I will confirm after this meeting and make sure that you have the proper answer for that. But I'm fairly certain that it's community standards that also will take care of adding or removing parking.
And then one other thing to note, the truck violations is that, enforced by the Ann Arbor Police Department.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then device 2 is another speed hump. It's just under 200 feet away from the other one. This one's near 124 and 127 Grandview Drive, so just on the other side of the block towards Dexter. I will say that there was a bit of a challenge with the number of driveways that are staggered along Grandview, so we did have to find locations to make sure that the speed humps weren't in front of or encroaching on anyone's driveway. So I can't recall if there was a lot of wiggle room with these locations. But again, speed humps can result in speed reduction, traffic volume reduction. So it would slow trucks down and maybe in the future deter them. But also, as Lori mentioned, that because there is a no truck sign at the ends of the street, that the Ann Arbor Police Department could be brought into the conversation to help with enforcement on that. And then community standards would be the contact to reach out to about removing some of that on-street parking so close to the intersection. Were there any other questions or feedback on these devices or just on the approach? I'm going to move on to polling, but if there are any questions, just again, please raise your hand or use the Q&A function. So the next two slides are just poll questions for those two devices we just discussed. Poll question is, do you support device number 1, the speed hump that's near 110 and 117 Grandview over towards Jackson? And I know not everyone was able to join when we did the one of the earlier poll questions, but there are options if you happen to not live in the project area and are attending this meeting. But I do think that everyone here is a resident of Grandview. So I will share the results. It looks like we all have support for this, which is great. I love to see it. If there's any context or any hesitation, just, you can use the Q&A, you can do it anonymously, you can raise your hand. I want to make sure that we get as much feedback as possible from everyone. But then the next one is just same kind of question. Do you support device number 2? And this one is the speed hump that's towards Dexter at 124 and 127 Grandview. And it looks like everyone's supportive of this. So perfect. That was the end of the feedback. The next few slides are just to discuss how the rest of the traffic calming program will go. So over the next week or so, we'll post today's presentation and the recording to the project website. So if anyone wants to go back to it, or if any neighbors weren't able to attend but wanted to, if they want to get a summary, we're also going to post a summary of today's polling and use feedback to just make sure that we've looked at everything before we come up with the preliminary plan. That summary will also have, I'll put in writing, the summary will have who we need to reach out to address those issues of the intersection parking and truck violations. So that'll be in the summary. The next step will be meeting number 2. Meeting number 2 will consist of 2 parts, which are a self-guided tour and another Zoom meeting. The Zoom meeting is scheduled for July 13th. For the self-guided tour, you will receive a mailing packet at least 2 weeks ahead of the Zoom meeting. The packet will contain device images and descriptions, which can be utilized to complete a self-guided tour prior to the meeting. Approximate device locations are going to be marked in spray paint on the pavement. So out in the street, there will be spray paint markings of the devices. There will be a temporary sign near the device location displaying the device image and description, the same one that you'll get in your mailing packet. And alternatively, you could also use Google Street View to conduct the self-guided tour. The meeting number 2, the Zoom portion, is scheduled, as I said, July 13th, which is a Thursday, also at 6 p.m. During the meeting, we will present the preliminary plan, answer any questions, poll the audience on each device, similar to what we just did. And then after that, the last step of the traffic calming process is final polling. So after meeting 2, the plan will be finalized, and then we'll send it out to project area residents again. All residents and property owners will be mailed the final polling package, which will contain a cover letter, the final plan, and a final poll. So just like the initial questionnaire, you'll have the option of submitting your poll either by mail or just completing it online. Ooh, meeting 2 is July 6th, not 13th. I believe we had to change it to the 6th. I am so sorry for that. I believe it is the 6th. I will double check before we leave today. So when you get the final polling card, like I said, you'll have the option of submitting it by mail or completing it online. To continue moving forward in the traffic calming process, more than 50% response support is required. So that means if 4 people participate in the final poll, 2 say yes, 2 say no, the plan cannot move forward. In this example, at least 3 people would have to say yes in support, more than 50%. So if that criterion is met, our team will request support from the Transportation Commission and submit the plan for City Council's approval. If the project receives approval from City Council, then a construction date will be determined. And I am going to just double check one thing. Thank you so much, Ben, for catching that, because the meeting is not July 13th, it's July 6th. Originally it was July 13th, but we had to move it up. So let me just change that in this next slide here before I mess anything up.
And then it looks like we have a question from Susan. If you want to unmute yourself, go ahead.
Okay, I think.
Might I suggest that our city council people be invited to the walking tour? Because they should know what's going on here and what some of our concerns are that may not be totally the purview of traffic calming, but are related. Like I won't get into them now, but there are other things we've talked about that it just could be a good way for us to put heads together and for them to find out what's on our minds about traffic on our street.
You're right. You're absolutely right, especially with some of these things that, like you said, can't be addressed through traffic calming. So I will say that whenever we send any of the mailings that we've sent out or any of the announcements, like when we sent out the initial questionnaire, when we sent out the meeting invites, those things, we do also follow the city's protocol to inform your council members. So I believe Grandview is in Ward 5, so you have 2 council members that are given the communication. They're not directly invited, but I'm not sure what the typical protocol is for that, but I will, I'll see if it's possible to send a direct invitation to them, but they will be informed of it, of the self-guided tour and the meeting.
Part of what I'm thinking is, we're a funny little street. We're not, and if we just look at from the polling you saw, there's you guys are off to a great start with a very sensible solution to what's going on with traffic calming. But I'd like them to know about that, but also to think about, I mean, our council people, because they can represent us to their colleagues about sort of what's going on with food trucks or not and enforcement issues. They can help us with that. It's different than just calling the cops and
Yes.
expecting them to solve all this. But it's just a thought I had, that's all.
Oh, yeah, I know. I 100% hear what you're saying. And I agree. It would be different than just making a phone call to another department. This way they have, you know, if they know directly from constituents what the issues they're experiencing are, perhaps we would see a different solution. So like I said, I will, I'm not sure. I know that we follow a protocol to inform them of public mailings. So I will look into whether or not there's any protocol for direct invitations to the next meeting date and the self-guided tour
Yeah, thank you.
once it's set up. Of course, you're welcome. So as I said, today's presentation and recording will be posted to the project website in the next week or so. We'll also post a summary of today's polling and use the feedback just to fine tune and create the preliminary plan. Our meeting to discuss the preliminary plan is scheduled for July 6th, not the 13th, July 6th. The self-guided tour will be set up at least 2 weeks ahead of July 6th. After meeting number 2, oh, I'm sorry, Lori, were you going to say something?
I was just gonna say, did we ever come back to the on-street parking close to this intersecting street comment?
We did say that it would have to be addressed by community standards. Was there additional?
Yes, just one additional note, no parking on both sides of that street. They end about 50 feet from that intersecting roadway. And that distance is adequate for the turning movements for vehicles and is a pretty typical distance.
Okay, so there's no parking on either side of the street 50 feet from the within 50 feet of the intersection, correct?
Right.
Okay, so if we are seeing vehicles that aren't following then at that point it would be an enforcement issue. But again, we can make sure that either community standards or the police department have a request to go out there and either make sure that the signage is clear or that that those rules are being enforced. And Ben, I see you have your hand raised. You can go ahead and unmute if you'd like to talk.
Yeah, I made the comment about the near intersection parking.
Yeah.
Biggest offender is the post office, and we all love her, so she can park wherever she wants. But it really does, especially from Dexter and Arbor, create a situation where if anyone's trying to pull out and anyone's trying to pull in, and there's a hill there with a huge blind spot, makes it difficult. And on the other side, it's normally servicing vehicles, whether it be landscaping or Amazon or whatever it may be. Again, people are not trying to prevent, but make it very difficult to pull in. So I'm going to post in the Q&A because we don't have comments or anything, but I'm going to post a link to a Google Meet if anyone wants to continue the conversation afterwards. I don't think there's a lot of us here, so anyone wants to chat afterwards, I'm going to post that now. All right, thank you.
Of course, thank you. I will also add that if you have not, if you are not on, we do have an email list. So whenever we're mailing something out to all the residences, we have an email list that we just notify that something is coming. So if you would like to be on that email list, you can drop it in the Q&A. Otherwise, also my contact information will be up here at the end. But so meeting number 2 scheduled for July 6th from 6 to 7:30. After meeting number 2, the plan will be finalized. It'll be sent to everyone by August 22nd. It'll be sent out by August 22nd for final polling. You'll have the option to complete the poll either by mail or online. The deadline to fill it out online or to postmark is September 11. The requirement, as I said before, to move forward from the final polling is that of the people who participate in polling, there needs to be more than 50% approval of the final plan. So if that requirement is met, our team will then request support from the Transportation Committee at their September meeting tentatively, and then submit the plan for City Council approval at one of their October meetings. And here's my contact information. If there are additional comments or questions after today, you can leave a voicemail, you can send me an email. There's the project website if you haven't had a chance to take a look. I do have some email addresses in here, so I will make sure to add those to my list. I'm going to launch the demographic poll that if you did not get a chance to complete it before the meeting started, please do so before you leave today. This poll is just created by the city. They use it at all of their public engagement meetings so they can just help. They use the data to help improve ongoing public engagement efforts. So this is just an anonymous standard demographic survey that they have. As I said, if you have additional comments, questions, thoughts that maybe you didn't get a chance to share or that come up later, please reach out to me. I'll leave the meeting open for another 4 or 5 minutes. Otherwise, you can leave at any time. I just want to say thank you for participating, for attending. I really appreciate your time. I know it's the end of the day. I appreciate your care and your interest in this project, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you.